Straight Talking Cyber, we look at Apple's latest iOS release, the latest news on biometric security, which is getting rather interesting, and serious warnings around using Facebook Messenger, why you should be concerned.
This week, we've seen the launch of iOS 15.3, which came with a lot of security updates. That was actually the main focus of 15.3. But at the same time, we've also seen the first beta for iOS 15.4 already, which is fairly exciting, actually, in terms of security and privacy. We've got a couple of quite interesting new features coming.
So what's the feature that excites you the most?
It's hard to know until we actually see it. I mean, for me, the update to the password manager is a pretty big new feature. It is for Apple anyway. I mean, other password managers do this kind of stuff anyway, which is update to add notes to passwords. So you can add kind of security questions and stuff like that into your password manager, which, as we know, other people already do. It is Apple playing catch up, but at the same time, it's making the Apple Password Manager more relevant and actually more secure. So that's pretty exciting to me.
Talking about Apple playing catch up, are they falling behind with their own promises? Because I understand that from 15.4, is it that they won't be supporting security updates for 14?
Well, they're not supporting them already, actually, as of 15.3. So that was quite a big surprise. But if you look at the small print on the announcements on Apple's website, which talked about security updates coming to iOS 14, it said that this wouldn't be happening permanently. The wording said, this is what we will be doing for now. So although it was a surprise because we all assumed that it would be happening at least for the duration of 15, it isn't actually going against what they necessarily said. It's just a bit disappointing because now you have to update to 15 in order to be secure. There is no doubt about it. At least our messaging can now be more clear, which is a good thing, definitely. The other thing we saw that's coming in 15.4 is something that we've been waiting for 2 years now. And that's one that I said I've got mixed feelings about. I'm excited because basically you shall be able to open your iPhone while wearing a mask, right? Without using your watch, you can do it. And it shall basically scan the area around your eyes, and that's how they'll recognize your face. Don't know how secure it's going to be. That may be a problem.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that if it reduces the field that's being used for identification, then it's going to be less secure than Face ID without a mask. I mean, that must be a given, don't you agree, Zach?
Yeah, I mean, it'd be interesting to see how they've actually done it. One of the ways they may have done it is just forging some form of alias. So even if they've done it behind the scenes, because they can assume that they've covered the lower third of the face, and then just trying to create an alias that the AI can try to recognize. But you're right, the more of a face you give the algorithm, the better it's going to be at securing that. So if it's 1 in a billion, it becomes 1 in 100 million. You know, the data, I'm sure, is still very secure, but clearly not as secure.
And talking about more data, but this time from a privacy perspective, I've been looking at some interesting new research that just goes to reinforce what we already know, which is that privacy, our privacy online, goes beyond just giving cookie consent and the whole idea of flock, which is now sort of pretty much dead in the water, but whatever replaces it isn't all we've got to worry about when it comes to privacy and tracking, fingerprinting. And this research basically looks at graphic cards or your GPU to track users across the web with something that the researchers have called drawn apart. Now, device hardware fingerprinting is nothing new. It's used along with web browser data to track activity for targeted advertising. But the problem is that for trackers, these browser fingerprints, they evolve with time and with usage. So the tracking becomes less reliable the longer that you're using it. You can only get effective tracking for a certain period of time. And the researchers found that the median average for that effective tracking was 17.5 days. However, by feeding graphic primitives rendering times for different GPU execution parameters into a deep learning system, basically looking at exactly what your graphics card is doing and how it's doing it, They found it was possible to extend that from 17.5 days to 28 days at a time, which is a huge improvement, and something I think that we all need to bear in mind, that there's a lot more than cookies involved when it comes to our privacy.
I mean, this was the great undoing for Flock, because whilst in the laboratory, there were claims that it kind of helped hamper fingerprinting. Then we saw Google's admission that in actual fact it had created a greater fingerprinting surface. And this is the point: once you take any of these things out of the lab, then the trackers behind the scenes will look for any other identifiers, and then they can start to link them together. And I guess then we're talking about persistence, and for what period of time you can always track any data back, and then there's clearly overlap. So it doesn't work in segments. Once you've got that persistence, then you're playing kind of stepping stones moving forwards. And that is, unfortunately, you need to go as far as say where Apple's gone with Safari, which is clearly anathema to what Chrome does, in order to try and break that chain.
Yeah, definitely. And it's the same with Apple's app tracking transparency, isn't it? I mean, that's been great for certain types of trackers, but it is still possible to track people, as many pieces of research have found. So people just have to be very careful and kind of be aware of their own privacy. And it isn't just saying no to cookies.
So one of the things I'm looking at this week is, so Apple's done a really good job on the tracking side. We've talked lots about it on STC. Where it's done a less good job, and where it's put the security and privacy of users at risk, is its stubborn insistence on not playing nice with the rest of the mobile ecosystem when it comes to text messaging. So iMessage remains a walled garden. It remains limited to Apple users. As soon as Apple users want to use the stock messenger to communicate outside of Apple's walled garden, then they fall back on rudimentary, unsecure SMS. And we've seen Google's latest taunt, or whatever you'd call it, pleas for Apple to jump on board. But interestingly, while that's been going on, two things that are interesting. One is WhatsApp has come up with another raft of improvements, so now we'll be able to delete messages for everybody that they were sent to for longer. Currently, it's about an hour. So if you can have regrets, maybe a few, but you better have them quickly in WhatsApp speed. That's going to extend to a couple of days, and that is really important. How often do we think, I wish I hadn't sent that, and just want to go and take that back? You'll be able to do that. And they're looking at other improvements, including the hints that there's an iPad app finally on the way. We'll see. It's been talked about for years, but I think it will be a big boost to everyone using an iPad when that comes through.
Yeah, that's interesting. And also kind of WhatsApp and ramping up between WhatsApp and Signal is quite interesting as well, because WhatsApp used to be kind of way ahead in terms of features, and Signal has added so many features, hasn't it, over the last year?
Yeah, I mean, we all use Signal. Obviously, it's incredibly usable. But, there's the network effect when it comes to messaging, and as good as Signal is, the reality is it's not used by that many people in the scheme of things. And therefore, we should all applaud WhatsApp's attempts to add functionality, add security, whether it's encrypted backups and plugging gaps that it has. WhatsApp remains the flagship secure messenger. It's used by a couple of billion people. It is secure. It's a brilliant phone service, much better than Signal, let's be honest. Signal has its faults when it comes to trying to use it for voice and video. WhatsApp has a much bigger infrastructure and is able to carry much better than that.
The biggest problem that people tell me with Signal when I suggest they switch over to Signal, especially from the privacy perspective, is that you have to give up your phone number. You're giving your mobile phone number out to people, and they don't want to do that. And I'm not quite sure how Signal would get over that, or if they even want to be honest. But that is a barrier for a lot of people.
Aren't they trying to move away from that with the pins idea that they came up with last year? Because a lot of people in response to that was saying, well, why aren't you taking away phone numbers from Signal? Because I have to give my real number out. So I think they are kind of trying to do something towards it. They just haven't brought it in yet. And time is going and running out, isn't it, really?
I guess, and then we're into, it becomes ever niche, doesn't it? I mean, most people aren't that concerned of giving out their phone number. I think and this is links to the other thing I'm looking at this weekend, which is just, whether you can look people up. So the advantage that WhatsApp and the Signal has is, the reality is you've got to know somebody's phone number in order to message them. So yeah, if they're in your address book, you'll find that they're on the app and you can use it. You can't browse, you can't crawl through Signal trying to find people to contact, which you clearly can on a social media platform. And the other thing we've seen in the last few days is Facebook Messenger announcing a raft of new features which are pushing its security envelope further. So encrypted messaging across groups, screenshot warnings, so in essence, expanding encrypted messaging for its users. There was big warnings in the UK a week or two ago around Facebook Messenger's plans to expand encryption because of child grooming and the ability for adults to contact children, and that was defended robustly. But there is a massive issue there, and that is something that we need to be worried about. And interestingly, I think if you go talk to the WhatsApp guys, they see it as well. The reality is, if you have a platform where you can search for users by pictures, profiles, locations, whatever else, linking that to secure, encrypted, blindsided messaging, if you like, where that site has both adults and children, and you have no ability really to police the connection or the communication between the two, that's a bad idea. So whilst I'm a huge advocate for encrypted messaging, I've said continuously adding encrypted messaging to a social media platform where you can crawl the site, browse for people to contact, it is a bad idea. And I think the UK is in a difficult position when it comes to some of these security messages, because there's clearly the overall pushback against encrypted messaging writ large. But I think on this one, it is something that users should be aware of. I've got children, right? Do I want my kids on Facebook to have a secure messaging platform where we wouldn't be able to see what's done? Encrypted message disappears, photos are sent, photo disappears. I don't think that's a good idea, frankly.
I mean, to me, that's like education. Education is the most important thing. Facebook Messenger is not a secure form of messaging, but just educate people about that, and then have WhatsApp, for secure messaging. It's about branding these, not trying to kind of put security into Facebook Messenger.